Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Tech Certification Podcast series. I'm Sundar Nagaratnam and will be hosting the podcast. In this first episode, I'll share an overview of the Tech Certification Playbook, as well as offer some guidance on how to design your certification framework if you're either getting started or looking to revamp your program. For those of you that may not know me, I thought a brief background of my professional journey might help. Many years ago, I was fortunate to work at Oracle University, leading their database and tools curriculum. I was responsible for launching their first certifications, working with some really smart folks. I also ran product management in leading the launch of a SaaS-based learning management system called Oracle iLearning. It was a little ahead of its time then. I've subsequently held GM roles for education at companies like Hyperion, Cognos, NetApp, VMware, Salesforce, and most recently at Automation Anywhere. All these roles were global and included all aspects of product training for customers, partners, employees, and the broader ecosystem. I had the good fortune of designing, restructuring, or evolving certification programs with different business models, targeting different types of audiences and roles, and addressing a myriad of business imperatives. I also ran sales and partner enablement in some of these organizations. Along this journey, I've also been a strategic advisor for several companies in building out their education strategy. Typically, this has been for SaaS companies that have been growing very fast and have hit a certain critical phase where the case for certification has become real or the charter of the education organization needs to be well formulated. I'm also currently an advisor at Talview, and I've been fortunate to be exposed to their innovative platform. The Playbook is a comprehensive guide that provides a step-by-step framework for certification owners to create, implement, and operationalize sustainable certification programs. The Playbook starts with an overview of credentials and their taxonomy. It provides an understanding of the different types of credentials and how they fit into your organization's overall credentialing framework. This will be the focus of today's podcast. I'll offer up a credential framework for you to follow, which can help ensure consistency and clarity in your organization's credential design and taxonomy. Next, the Playbook delves into the reasons why an organization may choose to establish a certification program. In this chapter, we discuss the various drivers that may motivate your organization to create a certification program and why it's important to get out of legacy mode if your program hasn't evolved with the pace of digital transformation. In the third chapter, we covered the critical aspects of developing the business case for your certification program. We provide guidance on how to identify your organization's mission and objectives and how to structure your certification program to align with these goals. We also discuss budgeting and funding considerations, including tapping into third-party expertise and technology requirements. In today's podcast, I'll also delve into Chapter 4. This will be on the nuts and bolts of designing your certification framework. I'll explore the various approaches from leading certification programs and offer up an example of a flexible certification framework for you to consider. I'll also discuss validity and recertification considerations and provide guidance on how to determine the best approach for your certifications. and specific needs. Chapter 5 focuses on the development of your certification exams. We covered the process of taking your exams from concept to operationalization. We also outline key considerations in exam development, such as validity, reliability, and fairness. There's really a lot of externally available literature on this topic. Our focus in the playbook is to share some approaches for accelerated exam development. Once your certification exam or exams have been developed, the next step is to launch the program. In Chapter 6, we discuss pricing considerations and program agreements policies that should be in place before launch. The user experience considerations and candidate journey management from the initial application process to certification maintenance and renewal are quite often an afterthought where the journey is stitched together with disparate processes and technologies. In Chapter 7, we explore how to create the best candidate experience throughout the certification process. Chapter 8 covers what assets candidates should be provided with to prepare for their certification exam. We provide guidance on exam guides, study and training resources, and supporting information to help candidates succeed. There really is a lot that comes into play in Chapter 9, where we cover the delivery of your certification exam. We explore exam proctoring options, delivery platform considerations, and the differences between automated and live remote proctoring. We also discuss exam and data security, privacy, and accessibility considerations. Needless to say, your certification program's launch and success will be dependent on several other functions in your company. In Chapter 10, we share some of the experience in teaming with these organizations to keep them informed, dependencies you need to be aware of, and how you should engage them as evangelists for your program so they can create a multiplier effect. Chapter 11 gives you a recipe for an effective marketing program to drive awareness and demand for your program through targeted messaging and marketing campaigns while leveraging the right marketing channels and assets. We wrap up the playbook with operational considerations, including fulfillment, support, and exam maintenance and refresh. There you have it, a brief overview of the recently launched tech certification playbook. We'll now hone in on Chapter 1, getting the taxonomy of credentials right that resonates with your target audience and stakeholders. Once your program is up and running, it really becomes difficult to rebrand and redefine the nomenclature. Even if the terminology is obvious to many of you, which I suspect it is important to take the time to educate your stakeholders within your organization. They may have come across the terms certificate, accreditation, micro-credentials, certification, specialization in various contexts, but really may not necessarily know how each of these are different. Let me start with the umbrella term credentialing, which I'll attempt to define as concisely as possible. A credential is an evidence of a qualification or completion or achievement or competency. So again, a credential is an evidence of a qualification or a completion or achievement or competency. It's a mechanism to establish varying levels of credibility around the quality of services being delivered by that credentialed individual. I found the following definitions to work effectively in the companies that I've worked at, you may be adopting something similar or a nuanced variation as I go through these definitions here of each of these terms. Most importantly, it's not necessary for you to offer all these credentials, but keep the definitions in mind as you design the right approach for your program and also as you scale and evolve your program. A certificate, not to be confused with certification, of course. In the world of education and training, it's typically used in the context of attendance or successful participation of a training activity like instructor-led training or an on-demand course. Something like a certificate of completion or certificate of participation is given out as proof of engagement or participation. Most commonly, this is made available as a PDF file with the candidate's name, date of participation, the name of the training activity, and the organization that offered up the program. Nothing new here. The term accreditation is used most commonly in the context of sales and pre-sales, especially for partner organizations. I've religiously used this in all the companies I've been at, really focusing on partners. It is a validation of a general standard of quality, typically of being able to pitch the value proposition of your company's products or being able to deliver a compelling demo, as an example. The former would be a form of a sales accreditation, and the latter would be for a pre-sales accreditation. Let me now shift, and moving forward, we'll be focusing on the key term certification. A certification is a designated credential earned by an individual to validate their competence in performing a job role. IT certification is a designation demonstrating a professional's competency in a specific role, in a specific or a certain aspect of technology, and is usually vendor-specific. The role of a business practitioner, an administrator, or a developer, an implementation consultant, or an architect are the most obvious examples that come to mind. Where does a specialization fit? I've not used this necessarily in every company that I've been at, but it fits the context of an adjacent validation on a specialized topic area of a broader subject area. This can be delivered either as a certification or accreditation, or even as a micro-credential. AWS uses the term specialty on exams they offer in strategic aspects of AWS Cloud. That brings up the taxonomy of the micro-credential. Organizations that use them typically map them to shorter on-demand learning outcomes with on-demand assessments. They could be stackable, leading to a broader certification. I refer to micro-credentials as sort of pats on the back or milestones along the learning journey, or issued for gratification purposes, especially when your target audiences are the millennials and the Gen Xers. They really love these. In some cases, they're also used for validating delta capabilities around new product releases. Finally, we have badges. A digital badge is an online representation of a skill a candidate has earned. It can be for an accreditation or a certification or a micro-credential or a specialization. Badges can be shared to showcase the user's achievement, typically on social media, but also they have metadata embedded in them to authenticate the credential. With that backdrop on the credential taxonomy, how should you go about designing your credentialing and certification framework? While we will be covering the topic of making the case for your certification program in the next podcast, If you find yourself a little early in the game, or if you do not have the right budget, maturity in technology to build out a full-fledged certification program, you might perhaps start out with micro-credentials. This approach would also align very well for emerging product areas or technology areas in an otherwise mature program where you may be evidencing some demand or pressure for enabling and validating the capabilities of internal and partner teams. Micro-credentialing would be the way to go there until the technology matures. You also need to factor in other dimensions here that go into full-blown competency mapping exercises. The target audience profile and role, product, technology, the complexity, specialization areas, etc. I'd like to walk you through a framework that would give you the flexibility to expand across any of these dimensions as well. The framework will also help you figure out what exams are best suited for knowledge-based versus performance-based. Should the exams be low stakes or high stakes? What is the budget you're working with? What are the business drivers for your program? All the decisions that you make will have downstream impact on other areas. Decisions on pricing of your certifications, policies on recertification and maintenance, your technology platform choices, proctoring requirements, etc. Chapter 4 of the Playbook, which I'm also covering in this podcast, is your reference section for this portion of the podcast. In addition to my experience and best practices in some of the companies I've been at, let's also take a look at some of the established certification programs in the IT, cloud, cybersecurity, networking, applications, and AI space. Most of the programs use something that I call tiering by role, with a baseline certification that might span or cut across many roles. If I were to use an analogy here, this sort of maps into, let's say, some core course requirements if you're going through your undergraduate program, irrespective of which degree is being earned. The certifications then become more role-specific, with the most common roles being at the business, administrator, developer, consultant, and architect levels. SAP, for example, uses the application technology developer taxonomy. This is analogous to degrees in different fields of study. Now, within each role, depending on the scale of the program, your investment level, the demand, and the complexity of the technology, you get multiple tiers: foundational, associate or specialist level, and professional. These are commonly used terms, as you will see were provided details in the playbook. And 3 tiers seem to be the most common framework. Google Cloud, AWS, SAP, NVIDIA, Automation Anywhere are really good examples of this. To me, this is sort of like going from a BS to a master's to a PhD in the world of academy. Some organizations, like VMware and Cisco, follow a similar approach but extend this to 4 and 5 tiers, maybe postdoc and beyond that, starting with entry-level roles and ascending to the highest level of expertise. Companies with multi-product portfolios, SAP, ServiceNow, Oracle, Salesforce, these are all good examples, will have product-specific certifications by role, with 1, 2, or 3 tiers for each of those product roles, depending on the maturity of the technology and the market demand. As I mentioned earlier in the taxonomy of credentials, AWS offers specialty certifications for the adjacencies. Now, you'll notice that each organization will have its own nuances and taxonomy, but the general concept and framework is what I've just shared. Within this, the framework for micro-credentials also gets plugged in. Almost all the companies offer these micro-credentials within their learning management systems and map them to various learning content and completion requirements there. So let's now apply this learning and best practices from other companies to a framework that could work for you. I've been a fan of what I call the pyramid framework that has served me well at many of the companies I've been at, including those that I've engaged with in an advisory capacity. If you're embarking on a new certification program, the setup gives you a robust and flexible framework. The key advantages of this approach are you build a foundational exam that's common across your audiences. It sort of serves as a hook into your certification ecosystem, helps you with branding and awareness, and it's a focused investment where you may not quite have all the budgetary commitments for a broader program. B, your candidates can aspire to grow their skill levels and career as your company and technology grows. You can gradually increase the investment in your program based on the adoption, the maturization of your processes, and the ability to resource and support it. D, your company may have multiple product lines, and you can add additional domains within this flexible framework. A, an additional aspect of the framework is the approach to developing the exams. Typical of many companies is to use the knowledge-based approach at the lower tiers and gradually move up more to performance-based approach as you get to the higher levels. Once you establish the framework, other things fall into place as well, such as your pricing by tier, your proctoring decisions, and the policies around certification renewals or recertifications. Just as an example, your associate level exams could be knowledge-based, priced consistently across all the domains and roles at, let's say, $200 for the Western Hemisphere. This is just an illustrative example. You may choose to offer AI-powered remote proctoring that will remove the barrier for entry for candidates, allowing you to scale very easily as well, and offer this at a much lower cost potentially. You may also require a maintenance exam once a year to keep the certification current. When you mature and get to an architect level, you may set the pricing at $1,000. This could be performance-based, may require an in-person approach, and once attained, the recertification requirements would be once every 3 years or even once every 5 years. Again, I'm using this as an illustration, not making a specific recommendation. Let's segue into the last section of this podcast, which is around how you ensure that the certifications once granted stay current and relevant. The accelerated growth of your company's technology and product is really what's driving their demand for certification. And especially in the world of SaaS, your company is rolling out new capabilities monthly or quarterly. How do you keep your certifications relevant? This is about redefining your exam development process, making the decisions on whether to have a maintenance or refresh renewal program versus a recertification every X number of years. How should you define your exam policies? The approach and investments to provide updated and supporting training and exam prep assets need to be fleshed out as well. If you build all this, will the candidates come? So let's take the example of two approaches from the leading companies. Amazon, Google Cloud, Cisco, VMware, etc. offer certifications that are valid for 2 to 3 years. So at the end of this period, candidates are expected to get recertified. This means taking the full exam all over again. Some of them offer half-off discounts to get recertified, while others expect candidates to pay full price. Some of them have additional continuous learning requirements. They also require candidates to be certified at the highest level versus needing to recertify at every low level. This means if you have an architect level certification and you just get recertified there, you may not need the associate and the professional level certifications. This approach seems to work well if you're more of an infrastructure company, is what I have experienced. For applications-focused companies, and this is for the likes of SAP, ServiceNow, Salesforce, there is an expectation of ongoing maintenance. This can be release-specific, or more typical, it's an annual Delta exam to maintain the certification. While Salesforce offers the exam for free, ServiceNow and SAP offer annual packs at a discounted price for maintaining multiple certifications. Now, if your program is new, I would recommend starting with something simple. You could consider releasing a maintenance exam and associated training modules with each product release or once a year. Keep the maintenance or Delta exam less rigorous and with fewer questions, knowledge base, and perhaps, let's say, 1/3 the number of test items as the main exam. Consider offering the exam along with learning content via your learning management system in an AI-based remote proctoring environment so that it is relatively low stakes. Make sure to establish a badging mechanism to update the credentials with the right metadata, including the validity date. So this brings us to the end of today's podcast. I'd like to leave you with 3 important takeaways. The first is getting that credential taxonomy right, and most importantly, educating your stakeholders. Certification, accreditation, micro-credentials, specialization, badging may all be interchangeable for that. Second takeaway, design your certification framework so that you can start small, build out across roles and domains, and execute later on the roadmap to deeper levels of proficiency. Finally, establish the validity period and approach for maintenance or recertification, along with all the supporting policies, training, and operational aspects. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you found it informative and useful. I am confident that by following the playbook, you'll be able to create and launch a successful certification program that will help your organization stand out and advance in the industry. We now leave you with a preview of what is to come. I'll be releasing about 1 podcast a month for the next few months. I expect to have some thought leaders and innovators join me for a few of the sessions. The next one is on making the case for a certification program. I'll talk about what your drivers might be, how you time the initiative, who benefits from the certifications, how you build a business case and get the resources, people, program, dollars, etc. to make the right investments to launch and sustain the program.